And then McElroy was appointed cardinal. And he never met with her. He's never talked to her. He's never reached out to her. And then he's appointed cardinal. And now he's appointed Cardinal of Washington, D.C. The Vatican might as well send up a huge flag that says that we don't care about victims. Is it true that there's no other bishop, there's no cardinal that doesn't have this kind of record? So if you're going to appoint somebody, you're going to get someone with this kind of record? Sometimes I think that's true.
Bishop Strickland also spoke out yesterday. He says, in November, I asked the bishops of the United States, what will it take?
They choose these men not in spite of this, not because they don't know who they are, but because of who they are. It's just the most egregiously bad appointment that in the nation's capital, we are having appointed a man who is covered up and shown outrageous indifference to sex.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Over the weekend, I saw our friend Robert Nugent posting on his YouTube feed that, in fact, Cardinal Robert McElroy was getting the nod for DC. There were no public reports at the time of that. He was the first to talk about it. I reshared it, and the buzz was going about. And then, of course, Monday morning, as we reported yesterday, it's true. Cardinal Robert McElroy is going to go to DC and take over for Cardinal Gregory. Well, there's lots of questions about this. What about his connections to the former terrible person Theodore McCarrick? What about sex abuse crimes that were covered up in his diocese? $600 million paid out, in San Diego alone. What about his support for the LGBTQ lifestyle? What about his support for female ordinations? There's so much to be talked about, let alone the fact that he kicked out homeschoolers from parishes in his diocese in San Diego. What could be in store for us in DC? We've invited former seminarian professor, Dr. Janet Smith, to be on the team again. She wrote an article about the good cardinal a few years ago. We're going to link to that in the show notes, what the McElroy appointment says about the church's commitment to sex abuse victims. Dr. Janet Smith, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Morning.
Happy Epiphany to you, by the way. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Glad to have you on the team. Wish we could talk about brighter news. But a mutual friend of ours yesterday put out a statement, Rachel Messer-Giacomo. I reached out to her and spoke to her briefly yesterday about all of this. The PTSD of these victims, I don't think we can relate to, I can't relate to it anyway. The sex abuse victims and the crimes committed by their perpetrators that get covered up. I mean, it's an abuse that keeps on giving, it seems. And Rachel's certainly communicating that. I'm going to put a link to her post in our show notes today. But what do you think about all of this?
Oh, I don't know exactly what all this is, but yeah, it's really bad that the church is so insensitive to victims. They don't count. That is really the truth. As I've said before, there's three responses when someone reports I think there's basically three ways a bishop responds to an accusation of abuse against one of his priests. One of them is, oh, poor me, I have to deal with this again. The second one is, oh, poor priest, he's done so many wonderful things for the church that he should have to face this. And then the third is, what can I do to make the victim go away? And of course, the first response should be, oh, poor victim, one of our own who has been abused by a priest. How can I comfort this person? What can I do to help this person process everything that's happened? And of course, how can I help this person stay in the church where the graces are to be found? Now, I know few people more resilient than Rachel. Rachel's went through one of the most extraordinary incidences of sex abuse that I've heard of. She was a young woman who was groomed and engaged in ritual satanic sexual abuse. The perpetrator, Father Jacob Bertrand, he confessed to the crime and he was convicted of it. And she, when she first accused him, she just wanted him out of the priesthood. And that no more victims would be. There would be no more victims of his behavior. But she found out that in spite of promises that he would be removed from the priesthood, he was simply transferred and posted to a new parish.
Wow.
You can imagine that made her feel. And it was McElroy who did this, all right? And then McElroy was appointed cardinal. And he never met with her. He's never talked to her. He's never reached out to her. To speak with her and give her any comfort for what happened. And then he's appointed cardinal, and now he's appointed cardinal of Washington, D.C. It just seems that the church might as well just send up a huge flag, or the Vatican might as well send up a huge flag that says that we don't care about victims. And of course, Rachel isn't the only victim. There are many victims, even of Jacob Bertrand, women who accused him. He was very indifferent to the accusations against McCarrick. And all those victims of McCarrick are undoubtedly suffering because of this. So it's just the most egregiously bad appointment that in the nation's capital, we are having appointed a man who is covered up and shown outrageous indifference to sexual predators.
I guess it was right before the new year. I reported that former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick was going to get a pass. He was never going to go to jail, not one single day, or however many days he has left on planet Earth. And because the judge claims that he's not, mentally capable of, being responsible for his crimes, apparently. And the injustice of that, right? That's deep injustice. And the same report, I mentioned that Cardinal Wilton Gregory was definitely retiring and he would be replaced soon. And then I also mentioned, because the reports stated it, that he had promised he would release the financial records of Theodore McCarrick, which he has never, ever done. Cardinal McElroy has a history with McCarrick, just as Wilton Gregory had a history with McCarrick, just as Gregory's, the guy who was before Gregory had a history with McCarrick. It seems like McCarrick is still at the center of this cabal, of this controversy within Holy Mother Church, and it seems like they're going to get away with it, at least this side of the heavenly veil. But I mean, we all stand in judgment. But what do you think of that? You think we should just be more persevering through all that? Like the injustice of it outrages us.
Oh, yeah, the injustice is incredible. The continued injustice. Many people have mentioned the McCarrick report, and many people applauded the church for finally doing an investigation into one of its own. And of course, it was just a whitewash. It did not go deeply into the issue. I mean, the issue was McCarrick was taking seminarians. I believe he took 5 to Beach House on the Jersey Shore. And there was only beds enough for 4 of them. So the 5th was expected to share the bed of McCarrick. So the seminary evidently was identifying young men who would go with McCarrick. Now, surely they knew what was going on. Surely over the many years, one of those seminarians told them what was going on. And they were sending young men to New Jersey. Now, it is never mentioned in there who the rectors were or who the directors were that sent these young men. It's inconceivable to me that you do a report and you don't do any sort of reporting on who at the seminary knew, how were the boys selected, has anybody contacted all these boys to try to find out, young men, I should say, to find out what went on. I mean, not only was the one that abused that went into the bed with McCarrick, all those others were basically abused. They knew what was happening, and they knew it could be them, and they knew now that this is how the church operates, that they are just fodder, sexual fodder for bishops and cardinals. So it's a message that hasn't been expunged, all right? That message still hangs out there in the air. And then, as I said, a complete indifference to the victims. And how I'm a victim, you're a victim. I mean, it just spreads. Most immediately, of course, there is the victim himself or herself, and then their family. How many of the families of people who've been abused have left the church? And it just seems that there's,
Exactly.
Absolutely no concern about these people who have been gravely wronged by another member of the church.
Yeah,
So
I saw a post
I'm
on
horrified.
X. I saw a post on X just yesterday of somebody posting a picture of this cabal with a little emoji pointing at it and say, "This is why I left the church." And my heart just broke, thinking like, "You're going to leave Jesus because of Judas?" Like that's insane. That's literally insane. Okay, but let me, Dr. Smith, let me play the devil's advocate. Could it at all be possible? Is there any scenario in which Pope Francis, the papal nuncio, the dicastery for bishops, doesn't seemingly know about the controversy surrounding Cardinal McElroy and gave him the nod in complete ignorance? Is it at all possible that there's a scenario where that's true?
No, flatly no, absolutely no. It's been in the media. I'm sure they have stacks of reports about him from all sorts of sources. The nuncio must have a whole file cabinet full of information. No, it's not possible. And if it were possible, which it's not, it would be such inconceivable incompetence that they should all resign simply because they don't know what they ought to know in order to make a decision. It's almost as though they go out looking for people who have that record.
Isn't that something?
And I hope it's not true. Is it true that there's no other bishop, there's no cardinal that doesn't have this kind of record? So if you're going to appoint somebody, you're going to get someone with this kind of record? Sometimes I think that's true. I think that every diocese, I would think, all right, let's say almost every, but dioceses have been hiding sex abuse for decades and decades and decades. And a new man goes in to become a bishop of a diocese. And of course, he has a responsibility to go through those files to see who the priests are, what the accusations have been, etc. I guarantee you that there are accusations that have not been dealt with. And that there are very serious things in those files, accusations made against priests. And the bishops don't want to do anything about it. They, in a certain sense, they have no models of that. They have no models of bishops who have gone into dioceses and gone through their files and done a house cleaning. And it's almost certain that they were chosen because they wouldn't do that. They've been, as I've said for a long time, part of the formation of the priests is to take the backbone out of them. And the more successful that is, the higher they get up in the hierarchy of the church.
Bishop Strickland also spoke out yesterday. He says, in November, I asked the bishops of the United States, what will it take? It's not surprising that I received no response from the bishops. The appointment of the corrupt Cardinal McElroy to the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. raises the question again. Dr. Janet Smith, who is a former seminary professor, is joining us now. We're going to put a link to her article in Crisis Magazine from a couple of years ago, trying to raise the alarm about all of this. Dr. Smith, welcome back to the show. Bishop Strickland tried to ask the question. It's fallen on deaf ears. It's all falling on deaf ears, Dr. Smith. So if the Vatican knows who these people are and their history and the scandals that surround them, and still proceeds down this merry little path, and we call out, we ask, we try to raise awareness, and they're like, la la la, I cannot hear you, and they still do whatever they're going to do. What are we supposed to take from that? What message are we supposed to get from that response?
Well, again, we keep being horrified, and I am too. But the thing is, we should not be surprised. I mean, we should not be in the least bit surprised. These are the kinds of appointments that have been made during this pontificate. And they choose these men not in spite of this, not because they don't know who they are, but because of who they are. All right? That's why he was chosen. He's chosen because he's a pro-LGBTQ participation in the church. He's chosen because he wants to allow the divorced and remarried without benefit annulment to be admitted to communion. He's chosen because he will give communion to pro-abortion politicians. He's chosen because he will oppose Trump's proposals to send immigrants back to illegal immigrants back to their home countries. He's chosen for these reasons, not in spite of these reasons. And we shouldn't be surprised that bishops don't speak out. There is Strickland, okay? And what happened to him because he's a brave bishop? He got removed. I'm surprised that Paprocki is still in. Paprocki has called McElroy a heretic, right? And I'm surprised that he hasn't been removed. I think there's actually a shortage of men who will say yes to the invitation to be bishops these days, and that might be a reason they allow some men to remain that otherwise they would remove. But we're still horrified and disbelieving about the extent of corruption in the church. All right, we're still just so surprised at that, and we shouldn't. We should by now we should see what is happening. That there's a certain agenda that is being pushed, and the men who are behind that agenda are the ones getting promoted. And McElroy is the perfect example of this.
I think it's getting clearer, and the contrast between in these issues is also becoming clearer to most Catholics. And it is surprising to find that there's still a great number of Catholics who are very excited and very happy about Cardinal McElroy's appointment to DC because of how progressive he is. There's just so many Catholics, Dr. Smith, that really want all of this. And I would say that is also discouraging and disheartening. How do we handle our neighbor who seems to embrace this insanity?
Well, I think there's a couple drums we should just keep beating, it seems to me. And one is the problem with criminal immigrants, and not just immigrant. I don't want to say illegal immigrants for the most part, but we're watching now with, again, some degree of horror. And again, you don't see this in the mainstream media. I keep telling people they have to follow you and read the news on X and read Vigilant Fox and read Epoch News and all of this if they want to find out what's going on in this world. But in England, it's becoming into the news, which has been in the underground news for decades again, that women and girls are being raped constantly in the most horrifying, brutal way that you can't even read the police reports when there is one, because the police are standing back. They've been standing back for a long time, and they're actually putting in jail people who post something on the internet criticizing the lack of response to the girls being raped, largely, they say, by Pakistani immigrants, and arresting people who are making this public. We're not there yet, but we're getting closer. I mean, even that's not making the news. Isn't that a cover-up? And we have in the United States that about 2/3 of the Democrats in the House refused to vote for a bill that would deport from this country the violent, illegal immigrants who have been convicted of crimes of violence and rape against girls and women. They voted against such a bill. All right, we need someone in DC representing the Catholic Church that says legal immigration must be governed by the law, and those who don't abide by the law, especially those who engage in violent crimes, must be deported. And that's not happening. In fact, we're getting someone who has looked the other way in respect to sexual abuse, and we're getting someone who wants the borders basically open. So this is where we are right now. We should want a man that has absolutely the opposite record of McElroy coming into DC. And what has been done here is just to put a thorn in Trump's side by putting McElroy in, as opposed to putting someone in that position who can really, talk sense about immigration, help people understand the right of people to have strong borders. And yes, we want to be welcoming, and yes, we want to take care of the needy and the poor. But we have to do all these things in accord with the law and protection of our own people.
What do you think? We're down to just a couple minutes here in the radio side. What do you think of the possibility of? Let's spitball this hypothetical real quick. If there's a conclave in the coming days, right? God forbid, praying for Pope Francis's health. But nonetheless, let's say there's a conclave and we get a super conservative, Orthodox, great bishop. Do you think they would go through the motions of removing the people like McElroy and replacing them with more solid bishops? Or would they just deal with what they've got and hope for the best?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, we know how hard it is. We know that I believe Pope Benedict really did want to clean up the Curia, right? And he resigned. And he resigned because he couldn't. And he said, my authority extends from here to the door, is what he would say. I can tell these cardinals they have X, Y, and Z, but when they exit the door, they do whatever they want to do. So, I don't know if he could, ask them to all submit letters of resignation, put them on my desk by the morning, and, fill them with new people. But you're going to have to go far and wide to find brave men to replace the reprobates that are there. But it is certainly intense.
Pope Francis doesn't seem to have a problem with asking bishops to step down, so I don't know why the next pope would have that problem. But
did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.